So you want to read more books.
Maybe you already read, but it's irregular, or just not as often as you'd like. Or maybe you're like I was, and you don't read at all. From middle school till about halfway through grad school, I don't think I read a single book cover to cover. But in the past 5 months or so, I've built a reading habit, I've read almost every single day, and I've finished loads of books. Since I found reading to be super beneficial, I've decided to share with you how I went from a non-reader to an avid reader. Here are my top 5 tips for building a reading habit. Tip number 1 is to set small daily goals. When you're first getting into reading, it can be really tempting to say, I want to read 50 books this year, or 2 books every month. But if you do that without having an established reading habit, you're not setting yourself up for success. Start with a smaller, more manageable goal that you can do every single day, or at least a couple of times a week. Make it your goal to read 10 pages a day, or 1 page a day, even 1 sentence a day. If you're not reading at all right now, you can make your goal just to open the book every day. It may feel silly sitting down, getting your book out, opening it up just to close it up again. It might feel like a complete waste of time, but I promise you it's not. Every time you open up your book and read, even if it's just a little bit, you are reinforcing the idea that reading is a part of your identity. You are a reader. This is huge. Building a habit is so much easier if the habit you're trying to build is a part of your identity. Some days you'll start reading and by the time you hit your daily reading goal, you're really into the book and you just keep going, and that's okay. But some days you might just not be feeling it. You can still just open your book, read your daily minimum, and move on with your day. When you read, even on the days you don't feel like reading, you are reinforcing that self-belief that you are a reader. Because that's what readers do. They read. Tip number 2 is to schedule out time to read. A lot of people, my former self included, say that they don't have time to read. Oftentimes that just simply isn't true. Most people have time to read, they just don't make time to read. It doesn't need to be a huge amount of time, 10 to 15 minutes should be sufficient, but it needs to be time that is reserved for reading. A really easy way to do this is to associate your reading time with an action that you already do. For example, you could read every morning while you eat breakfast. You could plan to read right when you get home from work before you turn on the TV or do anything else. Or you could read right when you lay in bed before you go to sleep. The possibilities are endless, and it really depends on what your daily schedule already looks like. If you schedule out a specific time for your reading, you are far more likely to do it than if you just say, yeah, I'll read sometime. Tip number 3 is to put your book in a place where you can't miss it. If you keep the book you're currently reading stowed away on some shelf in another room, you're just creating more barriers between you and reading. If you have to get up from where you're sitting, walk to another room, maybe up or down some stairs, look on the shelf, find your book on that shelf, pull your book off the shelf, and return to the room you were just in just to get your book, you're going to be far less likely to read than if your book's just sitting right there ready to go. And you're going to save a lot of time too. Now this may sound kind of silly, but the more accessible you can make a habit, the easier it's going to be to build. Where you actually put your book is going to depend on where and when you scheduled your reading. So if you read while you eat breakfast, keep your book right where you eat breakfast. If you sit on a certain chair while you read, leave that book right on the chair. If you read at night before you go to sleep, then when you make your bed in the morning, put your book right on your pillow where you can't miss it. The more accessible and convenient your book is, the more likely you're going to read it. Tip number 4 is to get rid of distractions. You may think you're a really good multitasker and you can effectively read and do something else at the same time, but realistically you probably can't. Nobody can. You're going to get so much more reading done if you can give 100% of your focus to reading. When I first started getting back into reading, I did this thing where anytime I found myself picking up my phone to check it, I would immediately throw it across the room. That way if I really wanted to check my phone, I would have to get up from where I was sitting and go pick it up. Turns out I really didn't want to check my phone that bad, and I would just keep reading. Since then, I found that a much better solution is to put my phone in another room when it's time to read. I would also suggest turning off the TV and making the room you're reading in as quiet as possible. Not only is getting rid of distractions going to help you read for a longer amount of time, but you'll also be able to focus better that time that you are reading. This means that your reading speed and comprehension will likely improve. You'll be able to read more in the same amount of time and understand it better. When it's time to read, it's time to read. And that's it. My 5th and final tip is to read something that you actually enjoy. There's nothing saying you have to read self-help books or you have to read the new popular best-selling book. If you want to read Harry Potter again for the 15th time, then do it. Or branch out and try something new. If you like it, good, keep reading it. If not, then stop reading it. You don't have to finish every book that you start. If you don't know what kind of books you enjoy, get a library card. Not only is it free, but you'll also gain access to all sorts of books that you might not otherwise read. But don't force yourself to read a book you don't enjoy. Life's too short for that. So read whatever you want to read. That wraps up my top 5 tips for building a reading habit. If you have any other good ones, let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.